And welcome everybody to another wonderful week right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I've got a fantastic show here for you. If you're listening on radio, TV, listening somewhere like that, this will probably be I don't know yet. I haven't recorded it as I'm saying this, but it'll probably be a longer show because it is an interview episode here. I have joining me Katie Moyer. She is the current owner of Kentucky Hemp Works. She's a former president and current treasurer of the Kentucky Hemp Association, talking to me today about the CR, the continuing resolution that was recently passed. There's been a lot of talk about how it will damage Kentucky's hemp industry. And I know enough to know that this is a highly complicated subject. So I'm going to have her on to talk. But if you're watching there, obviously you have the breaks. I'm not going to break here as I'm talking with her, but we will be breaking in and out. So, if you want to listen to it continuously, or if the show gets cut off at the end, you can check out theandrewshow.com. See all the places where you can listen to the podcast as far as it goes. But Katie, thank you so much for taking some time here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be on here again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you've been on the show before. We've talked.
I think it might have been pre the official show too, like before the official show.
Yeah, before the official show. Back when I was just recording videos with people occasionally, I came down there and that's how I first started learning about hemp. And like I said, I know it's a complicated subject. So first, before we dig into the continuing resolution and how it affects, let's talk about before this resolution. What was the state? How does the hemp industry work in Kentucky?
Yeah, well, and there is quite a bit of history. I mean, this goes back really to the 90s, but as far as more recent legislative changes, back in 2013, Kentucky legalized hemp for pilot programs. Really it was just legalize hemp, create a regulatory structure, and then we set about creating some regulations. Now in 2014, the Farm Bill passed on the federal level, and that gave us some flexibility in being able to actually move forward with growing hemp and trying to process it and trying out marketing and things like that. Because we didn't have regulations yet. We've been working on regulations for about 9 months, and they were not in place yet. And the feds kind of just said, hey, anything below 0.3%, it's legal for departments of agriculture and universities or colleges to do research.
0.3% so that's how it got started. THC.
0.3% Delta 9 THC to be specific.
Okay, Delta 9.
Yep.
That is, like I said, I don't know enough. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I know enough to know that that is an important point. Delta 9 THC. It's important that we remember it's got to be below 0.3% Delta 9 THC in this discussion. I do know that's important. So I just want to, for the listeners, remember that.
That is very important. And it's important because there's lots of different kinds of THC. There's acids, and we can go into that a little bit deeper later. But that is important because that's how the law was written. They selected one very specific compound in this plant that has hundreds of compounds. And that specific compound dictated how all regulatory frameworks in all states were to be weighed and measured. So anything below,
and if somebody was trying to take this plant here for drug purposes, like to get high, what level of Delta 9 THC would that be?
So you're probably gonna start from 5% THC and then go up. So 0.3% in a plant is pretty much, it's not a plant for recreational purposes. Now you might see 5%. That's on the very low end. You're gonna see people try to push that THC percentage in plants up as high as they can, and you might see them going up into the high teens or the 20s. And then there's some argument back and forth on whether or not it can get much higher than that.
So you can't. can you get high off 0.3% Delta 9 THC?
No. I mean, I think you'd have to consume a huge quantity of it. And I think you'd probably, get sick from consuming so much before you ever really got high from it at point
Okay,
3.
so this conversation, just so everybody's aware and it's framed in, we're talking not about legalizing marijuana here. We're talking about a hemp product, and we're talking about a 0.3% that's so low that it really isn't for the kind of recreational smoking of the devil's lettuce, let's say, right?
Well, to be honest, that's kind of where some of the controversy comes in. Some people say that this was legalized to be a seed and a fiber crop. It's industrial. There shouldn't be any sort of recreational uses. Even very limited medical uses compared to opening up the entire plant, all the compounds at any levels. And where this controversy comes into play is that some people are using compounds that are similar to THC, or they're delta 8 THC, CBN, CBG, all these different compounds in the plant that are doing different things. And some of them give you a relaxed euphoric effect. And that's sort of the controversy here. Like, Congress is concerned that people might enjoy these gummies or tinctures or vapes, and they might have a good time and be relaxed and sleep better and, eat more. I mean, there's not a huge amount of risks to clean, safe, and tested products.
So they're talking about, so when we talk about the idea of legalizing kind of recreational marijuana, what I think most people are talking about is, you roll it up in a joint, you smoke it, you immediately feel high. Obviously, there's been a lot more recently, a lot of conversation about, and I understand conversation about, is that kind of thing causing psychosis? Is it causing those kinds of issues in people? And obviously, too, I think, from a sheer having visited places where marijuana is legal, there is sometimes where you're like, man, it does smell a lot like somebody's been smoking weed all the time. And that can be actually undesirable for people to have. But so that, with where it sat before the CR, that wasn't as much, that one wasn't legal in Kentucky outside of, I guess, medical marijuana. But that wasn't legal in Kentucky. What we're talking about here is things like different compounds that can cause, would you call it a downgraded effect that is not smoked but consumed rather through gummies or drinks or those kinds of things?
Yeah. Some people call it like a light beer effect. It's like a light version or a diet version. Diet weed is a common sort of, nickname for it. But, and without getting too far into the chemistry rabbit holes, there are so many different compounds in the plant that the CR affects. We're talking about a bill that was out to, keep people from getting high. But really what it does is throws the baby out with the bathwater. So there's no full spectrum CBD, there's no CBN, there's no CBG, there's no, all these acids and compounds and natural molecules that work together in the plant. It just, it pretty much wipes the floor clean. And what it sets the stage for, honestly, is the rise of synthetic cannabinoids that are made in pharmaceutical grade labs and probably have no organic material to begin with. But synthetic chemicals that can all be FDA approved. And that's one of the things, you've heard them talk about, well, we got to get the FDA in this. We got to get the FDA on this. Well, the FDA only wants products out there that every single pill is exactly the same. There's no room for, slight differences. And when you get natural products, you're going to have slight differences. And so those are things that people expect in the industry. And, they want things that are natural because, it just, pharmaceutical synthetic compounds are never going to compare to the natural bounty that we get from the earth.
Where things are right now
Mm-hmm.
is that the Delta 9 THC is regulated at 0.3, or not now, but before the CR was regulated, but the other compounds were kind of just out there for people to
Yeah.
experiment with. Is that what you'd say?
They were. Now, what we had in Kentucky, so to kind of go back to the timeline, we legalized hemp in 2014. In 2018, that Farm Bill was renewed, opening up hemp sales to everybody, not just departments of agriculture. And states had developed regulatory programs. And I won't get into other states, but in Kentucky, we had a very robust regulatory program. It already had several years under its belt and learned a lot of lessons, made a lot of, we made mistakes, they made mistakes, we grew and learned together. But these, what we call adult use products, had been coming to the forefront. They were very popular, and they were really eclipsing the CBD and the seed products and the fiber products that are sort of more on the sober cousin of the marijuana plant. So,
what are these? So you say adult use products? Are you talking about
mm-hmm.
the
Well,
drinks or those
the
kinds of
adult
things?
use products, it can be the drinks, the vapes, the drops, the gummies. But what really made them, be considered adult use is that there's some sort of mind altering effect. Maybe it's a gummy that only has a little bit of THC in it, but there's no CBD, and there's some other compounds in there instead of CBD that help with relaxation and help you stay asleep. And maybe those compounds, other than a little bit of THC, they don't really cause a high, but they do help you to relax and stay asleep, and they, help with pain and things like that. So people are using them for sleep gummies, and not just sleep, anxiety, depression, pain, and inflammation. Inflammation is a big one, but sleep is a big one too. So yes, while some people were just simply using these products to catch a buzz, most people were using it for some kind of therapeutic effect. And whether or not it had a lot of THC in there, or a little bit, it usually had some.
Well, and to be honest, I don't know a lot of quote unquote weed smokers or whatever you want to call it. I know a few. And I don't remember, I could be mistaken, I don't remember a single one of them saying, well, I'm going to eat these gummies instead of smoking a doobie out in the shed.
Mm-hmm.
I could be mistaken, but I
No,
obviously I don't have
right.
deep conversations with them about their marijuana use, but I don't, on the corners of Reddit and everything else, I haven't really seen anybody saying, you just eat these gummies here that are legal in somewhere like Kentucky. Now, obviously, gummies are legal in states where recreational marijuana is legal, sure. But I'm talking about here in Kentucky, where the Delta 9 is regulated. I haven't seen anybody talking about that. I could be mistaken, but I don't think it was like some sort of replacement for recreational marijuana use.
No, I don't think so. I think most people that use recreational cannabis they're going to use it no matter what. They're not going to go down to a gas station and pick up some gummies because they want to catch a buzz like that. They're just going to continue to get it where they always do. They're going to go over the border and get it from one of the dispensaries in another state. We hear that all the time. Quite frankly, the vast majority of people that are using these quote adult use hemp products are using it for some kind of sleep or some kind of therapeutic value, and predominantly they're older generations. I think I heard today that the average age of users of these adult hemp products are close to 60 years old. And I myself have a lot of individuals that, are so far on that age spectrum that they mail their orders to me with a paper check. So, they're not getting online. They're not going to get their grandkid or great grandkid.
I don't think the high school kids are cutting checks for
No, absolutely
hemp products. I
not.
personally don't have a checkbook, so I don't know the last time I actually paid something on my personal account with the check.
Yeah. I guess
If
I'm
ever.
I guess I'm an old head or something. I mean, I use checks all the time, but maybe I'm just too elder and millennial to let them go.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think I've had a checkbook for my personal account in like a decade. Probably the little starter checks they give you at the bank, and then that's it.
Yeah.
I've never bought never bought like a Winnie the Pooh checkbook.
So you've never written a note that says, "Can I please have another bottle of CBD mailed to my address with a check," and then mailed it off, and then got your CBD 2 weeks later?
No,
Really?
I don't. Katie, it might shock you. I don't really consume CBD. I don't really consume much. I'm a good old fashioned alcohol and ultra processed foods kind of guy. That's where I get my my spikes from.
Yeah.
I'm more of an upper.
The
I like to
fingers.
take caffeine every morning.
Yeah.
I'm something of a drug dealer myself on the caffeine front. Anyways, so
Right.
putting that to the side. So the state is that so the Delta 9 THCs take care of, but then the industry starts experimenting with these other compounds within it to create these adult use products, and people took issue with it.
Yes. And at that point, the legislature,
Who
they came
are
and
the
said,
people that took issue with it? Because
okay.
even the people that I know that are against recreational marijuana, and just full disclosure to anybody listening, anybody who's listened to the show for any length of time knows I have next to zero emotion on legalizing recreational marijuana. I have like zero emotion on it. I don't care either way. And I know I'm supposed to care one way or the other, and everybody will yell at me because I don't care one way or the other. But it's just not at the top of my concerns. I know it is for some people one way or the other. It's just not for me. So just full disclosure, I don't have much emotion on it. That being stated, even the people who I know have a lot of issues with it, they're having issues with obviously recreational marijuana, the kind we're talking about, people smoking weed and driving and all these other things. Even those people, I never heard any constituent anywhere crying out about other than Delta 9, hemp products, quote unquote, marijuana products, or whatever they want to call it, whatever they would call it. I haven't heard it. So was there a big constituency of actual constituents that really actually cared about this issue, or was there something else going at play here?
Yeah, I don't think there was a big constituency issue. I do think there was probably a few well-connected individuals that made a few phone calls and said, "Hey, this is really becoming a problem." One of the main issues we've had is we're competition with other industries, like alcohol and cigarettes and nicotine so that was kind of a big thing. But we get the news basically, and then what's interesting is each time they try to pass a bill to try to ban these products, they don't talk to the industry or say, "Hey, we have a problem with you." They just go straight to the ban. And I will tell you, we are the most open door industry you could imagine. We will be happy to come to the table to talk about hemp with any legislator, official, non-official, basically anybody that wants to sit still long enough. You don't have to scare us to get to the table by threatening to ban these products. But that's always the first knee-jerk reaction is just ban them. So they tried that a few years ago, and I'm going to say Gosh, I'm thinking of my timeline. There's been several times that we've had
They tried
run-ins
to
with.
ban everything, or they tried to talk to you guys?
No, they try to ban everything.
Oh, okay.
We
So
always want
they've never really wanted to talk with the industry over
right.
what the concerns are that they're having or hearing about. It's more just
Yeah,
which,
yeah.
like I said, I don't know a lot. I know enough to know it's a complicated issue. As people
Mhm,
here are listening to this for the first time, they're probably learning about there's different compounds in
mhm,
hemp, and that this was the only compound regulated. These other compounds weren't as regulated, which left some things open, and
mhm,
and some abilities to experiment. They're all learning about this for the first time, and what that tells me
mhm.
is that probably our legislators don't know anything either. And
That's right.
so when you have a complicated issue like this, if you're only listening to one side, you're going to be skewed in a certain direction compared to if you're trying just to learn about the subject so you can know a
Mhm.
little bit more about how to deal with it. So you said a few years ago they tried to regulate this or do something with
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, yeah. And to go in the right order. First, we had some actual, law enforcement action, and that would have been, I think, 2019, um, 2020. 2020, I'm going to guess. So they had some law enforcement action, went in and raided some stores. The Kentucky Hemp Association went back to, took them to court, said, hey, you can't just be raiding stores. These are legal products, and here's why. We disagreed, of course. And we ended up winning that lawsuit. So immediately, in fact, just a couple days before the judge announced that, he sided with us, we got the first attempt at changing the law to ban these products. And that told
So
us,
this
well,
wasn't a
obviously.
legal loophole, because I've heard that
Yeah.
all that
Mhm,
was taking place with this new CR. And like I said, we'll talk about that in a second with the add on to
mhm.
the CR. It was just closing a legal loophole, and all these operators were operating within a legal loophole. And so they shouldn't be surprised that they're out of business or whatever because they were always operating in a legal loophole. Would you say that's not accurate? It wasn't a legal loophole. It was literally the law was that these products were legal.
Yeah, yeah. And if it was really, what you would consider a loophole, then, whose fault is that? We didn't write the law. They did. We're just trying to make them follow it. So, if they want to write laws regarding a topic that they know nothing about, then we have a very creative industry, and we're going to find ways to work around that. But really, we proved on the state level that it was legal. The judge sided with us. And then, to prove our point even further, then, one of the senators in state Senate turned around and filed legislation to ban it. Now, keep in mind that this, lawsuit and this subsequent ban attempt was on the state level. And most times they're talking about the federal level being a loophole. And they're saying, that what we're doing on the state level is only possible because this is a loophole. But quite frankly, that law on the federal level is what we use to win our case. Like, hey, you said this was legal, so we're doing it. Um, but they attempted a ban. We beat the ban. The following year, they have a different legislator to attempt the ban. When we finally get this legislator to the table, it's a freshman, a young woman, a nurse. She said she had some real concerns about it because she was in the health industry, and that's totally understandable. And when we finally nailed her down for a meeting, and said, hey, we actually are with you on this. Like, we don't want kids to have these products. We don't want them to be untested and dangerous. We don't want them to have different ingredients than what's on the label, or be false advertising or manipulating people's emotions to get them to buy them. So, and when she realized that we're not like trying to be the Wild West, then, her demeanor really changed about it. And then it became, well, what can we do specifically to protect consumers? Because she needed to hear from experts, as somebody who was not in the cannabis industry, she needed to learn from us, what needs to be done to keep people safe. And that is, proper labeling and making sure that what you see is what you get. Proper testing and testing for residual solvents. A lot of people use solvents in their products, and whether or not those solvents are still in the final product should be confirmed, should be tested. Checking levels of THC, CBD, CBN, all these different compounds, and
Because the
I
testing
say the same ones
before,
over and over.
well, the testing before too was on the crop,
The
not
crop.
on the finished product, which is really where it
Yeah, and
matters.
we did have some testing. So it actually mimicked some testing laws that we had passed a couple of years before that were really related to all the, we'll say, proliferation, the success of the CBD industry. That's another time prior to this that we came to the table with the legislature and we said, yes, we think our labels need to be accurate for CBD and other things. But the original testing requirements were just in the field. They were just checking the farm crops to make sure that those were not above the 0.3% THC limit. So we added testing and added protocols to that later on down the road as things became popular.
Because also, and because when they found a crop that was over 0.3% THC, they burned it, right? I mean, they just destroyed the field. You were out as the farmer, your entire crop. But if you have, if your neighbor down the street, I don't know how it works, but if the neighbor down the street has, 0.1% and you have, or 0.2%, you've got 0.4, could you mix your crop and end up at 0.3%? I mean,
yeah. So to go back to that time frame, because a lot of this stuff, like, it's not in a straight timeline here, but to go back to the time frame where crops were actually being burned, that was one area. There was no legal argument. Like, we couldn't win that in court. It was above 0.3% delta 9 THC. So even though we could be mad about it and we could talk about it, and we couldn't go file a lawsuit about it. But what did arise out of that is these conversations with the ag department that say, well, you can blend it and retest it. You can put it through some kind of processing to, because ultimately that plant material is going to change multiple times in form before it becomes its finished product. Even if you're using the most natural methods, like taking some pure grain alcohol and throwing some hemp in the alcohol and shaking it every day and leaving it in a dark place for that alcohol to extract it, it is going through a different process. And when you extract it, it's going to change. Then you take the plant material out of your alcohol, right? And that changes the total percentage of THC by dry weight. So it's just, whether you're using the most solvent rich, chemical, synthetic, even, processes, or you're using natural processes, the plants in the field aren't really going to dictate what your final product is. It's whatever you make it.
So you said that it was, so you're sitting down and you're talking with Raymer about her bill. I mean, you didn't say her name, but I know who it is. I follow the legislature. I know who proposed the bill. I know who did it. And so you're talking to her.
Hornback was the first one. Hornback was the first one in the frame. So just carried his
he
bill
was run out of office.
But
anyway, so her response to you was, okay, let's work together. What can we do?
Let's work
Did that
together.
result in a positive bill for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And that really brings us to where I feel like we were in a good position in Kentucky. So we come to the table together, we testify together, we pass this bill with flying colors to regulate the adult use hemp industry and set some guidelines, and then ask, the executive branch to develop regulations to, actually be able to enforce these things. So, continuing down that timeline, after that, we started working not with the legislature, but with the regulators and developing this really rich and really robust regulatory program that the main things that it was to do was to keep it out of the hands of kids, to make sure that the labels were accurate, to make sure it was tested. Those were kind of the three biggest issues. There was a lot of other little things in there. And we went back and forth with them for months, almost a year, really, where we were attending public hearings and our little bitch sessions, which were the public feedback hearings, and we worked directly with the cabinet to find a good balance between, they wanted to nickel and dime us to death. They're still kind of nickel and diming us to death, but it's at least tolerable. But it was pretty bad. And so, and there were things that they didn't need to have. And there were things that they pulled from other states that were just wrong because nobody really told them like that compound doesn't exist, or nobody uses that solvent anymore, or, things like that. So there's a lot of work. And I always say that, because, so many times they hear this, well, it's unregulated, it's dangerous, and kids are getting it, and it's the Wild West, there's no regulations. And I'm like, hold on a second. We are regulated more closely than all of the food in your grocery store, all of the alcohol that you drink, all of your coffee, and all of your, basically, like, getting greens from the grocery store has a greater chance of causing you illness or harm than these regulated products. There are people that are just gas stations and, people that don't care, that are just importing the products from other countries, getting junk products off the black market. But for legitimate businesses that are not only producing these things, but, reselling them, getting them from producers and then selling them in their stores, they're good actors. They're trying to follow the rules. They're making sure that these products are tested. They're able to explain
it's already
them.
illegal for those other people that are getting these products off the black market or something. If you're concerned about that, wouldn't you enforce those laws better on those people?
Drug war's been going on for years and years. I mean, if they,
yeah, but they still don't sell, meth on they still don't sell meth most of the time in your local gas station. But these black market products are out there in your local gas station in packaging on a shelf, just being sold out in the open, and nobody's doing anything about it. Do you think they're using that as like an excuse to regulate you further? That's why they're not cracking down on it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But that's a big reason that we wanted to have these regulations, because, you hear it even from people in our industry and our association. They're like, well, I spend all this money and all this effort and I'm losing out on business because people are going down the street to, so-and-so's store, and they're getting these junk products. And I'm not selling flour because it's illegal in Kentucky, but they're selling flour a block away from me. So the idea with these regulations is to give the state an opportunity to be able to walk into these stores and look at their testing and look at their products, and all the products that are allowed to be sold in Kentucky are actually registered with the state as well. So they would be able to go through a store, and, it's time consuming, but go through a store and look at every product on the shelves and see whether or not it's registered with the state. There are cannabinoids and synthetic, and I want to say that twice. There are cannabinoids and synthetics that are completely banned from Kentucky. In fact, all synthetics are banned in Kentucky. That was part of our regulations as well. And I probably should have brought that up in the top 3, made it a top 4. But there, a lot of people say, well, these are synthetic because you're changing this or you're changing that. And that happens all the time in the food industry. It's not like weird science or anything like that. But we do have, regulations that say that synthetics and even some of the products that, people are making from natural products are definitely illegal. So anyway, the idea is that we give the state some power to go in and make sure that people are not mishandling and misselling these products.
So, is that the bill that handed off? What was it called? Weed water is what they were calling it, to the ABC board. Was that the same bill, or was that
No,
a
that was
different
another ban.
Okay.
That was the next ban, the next time they try to ban. Yeah, there's just so many that it's like every other year they're trying to ban this thing. And we're
Yeah,
like,
and
well, how about
the
instead of banning, let's just use some common sense. And most times they're like, hey, that's not such a bad idea. So yeah, the
well, and the
weed water
problem
ban.
with handing it off to ABC is just how does that play into our alcohol? We're a state where if you have to buy your alcohol through wholesalers, your local
Mhm.
bar or your local gas station. If they're running low on something, they can't say, well, I'm going to go over to Walmart and buy it and throw it up on my shelves. That's
Right.
illegal. You can't do it.
Yeah,
You have
that's
to
right.
buy it through a wholesaler. And so by throwing it
Mhm.
over to ABC, now are these products, okay, you have to buy them from a wholesaler. Now your small mom and pop shops have to try to get a wholesaler to carry their product.
Mhm.
And to be clear, a lot of these wholesalers have deals with alcohol companies that are very desirable, like
Yep.
Budweiser or like Coors and Miller and those, to
Mhm.
where they're carrying that product. And so they are beholden to big alcohol corporations, because those alcohol corporations have the power in that dynamic, because people are saying, oh, I want this alcohol. Well,
Mhm.
if you want
Yeah.
people to buy your other things from you, you got to also carry an alcohol that brings them through the door. And, now they have control over a lot of the industry as far as that goes. Has
Yeah,
that
and they can
bill
make or break a
passed?
brand.
Right. That bill passed, right?
Yes. So that bill passed, and that one started out as another ban. They basically just said, and I actually had met with the alcohol lobby, 5 or 6 of the different lobbyists for the alcohol industry. It was, spirits and wine and beer and all that. And they were like, hey, if you guys are going to be like marketing these products as intoxicating, which we don't, no, nobody in the hemp industry has ever said that they're intoxicating, but people who don't like it say that all the time. But they're like, if you're going to market these products as for adults, then you need to be in the same 3-tier system that we are. You need to have wholesalers. It needs to be heavily regulated. And I will say, when I talked to them, one of the last things that I said to them was to be careful what they wish for, because if they want hemp in their 3-tier program, it's gonna bring with it all of the problems that we have in the hemp industry. Like, they're trying to ban your stuff every year. For example, like, for a small example, they'll try to ban everything you're doing. But so we met with them, we talked to him, we try to kind of use reason and use common sense, and my thing was, well, if you don't want if you want to be involved in this industry and you're worried about these hemp beverages being major competition, like, I mean, one of the biggest things they said was like, so many people are drinking hemp beverages, they're proliferating. I'm like, proliferating? In small business, we call that successful. We say like, oh, your business is doing well, right? No, when it's hemp, it's proliferating. But that was a big thing for them. We're competition and direct competition. People were putting alcohol down and having hemp beverages instead. So anyway, moving on from that meeting and conversations with them happened before the session started. We had heard rumblings of bans on adult use hemp again, and we thought, well, why? We just went through this. Well, when the ban actually came out, we realized, well, it's the beverages. That's the problem. So we once again went to the legislature and said, hey, how about, instead of a ban, we regulate these, we find some common ground. We surely want to keep these out of the hands of kids as well. But we also, had to make the case that, there's products out there available for kids that are way more dangerous than these hemp beverages, like energy drinks, for example, soda, like all this stuff that they're
80
just.
White Monster is fantastic for all
Oh,
ages. And
oh
don't
yeah,
you come
right.
after my white monster, okay?
Yeah, I mean, for Andrew, yeah, they're fine.
You-
But you know what? You're an adult and you have the right to choose that. Just like
Listen, Katie, my
John,
14-year-old has a right to white monsters as well. I'm just joking. He doesn't
mine doesn't.
drink energy drinks,
So
but
yeah, no, mine doesn't. Now he will definitely get one and sneak it in and hide it behind his back. But yeah, like my kids shouldn't be drinking them. So we went to the legislature, and once again we kind of what is the word? We compromised on some of those things, and really, it was conversations were going pretty well. It was tense because we have like personalities on both sides that don't get along, but for the most part, we came up with a list of compromises and things that we would be willing to give up or sacrifice. And when it all came down to it, they threw that whole thing out the window. Didn't even listen to one compromise. Or I mean, we got absolutely nothing. Like that was the first time that we ever got completely railroaded and run over. Because what ultimately happened, what they eventually passed, was a bill that put hemp beverages into the 3-tier alcohol program, and then required anybody who was selling hemp beverages to have a liquor license. And we're like, okay, well, maybe you can get a liquor license in Louisville, but I don't know. I don't know that it's even possible to get a liquor license in Lexington without huge amounts of money and lawyers. And, there's a lot of counties around the state that you just can't get a liquor license anymore. There's none available.
well,
So,
also wouldn't that make too the manufacturers of the drinks, they would have to register the same as like a distillery, but
they would. Yeah.
but what's weird, so would they then be put under the distillery rules where you can direct, because they recently changed the laws over the past couple of years for
Mhm.
distilleries. So if you're an alcohol distiller, you can sell up to 55,000 gallons, I think, or something like that, of liquor directly. And then if you're a beer maker, you could make, I think it was 55,000 gallons. It was some sort of gallon limit to where you can sell directly from your distillery that amount of gallons, and then beyond that, you have to go to a distributor.
Yeah.
And they did that for like the cottage small brewers to have a chance. Did
Mhm.
that throw these beverage people into that same carve out, or did they have to immediately go to a distributor right away?
Yeah, there was the carve out for what we call like craft brewers or craft hemp beverage makers. So there was that, but what it really also did is then it requires them to have multiple licenses. So, and it also takes away the ability for somebody to go into an establishment and sit down and have a drink. So, the carve out for small craft beverage makers was kind of like, okay, maybe it's enough for this handful of companies that, it'll help them. But what it didn't really help, like we don't have a huge amount of people making hemp beverages in Kentucky. Most of them are getting them from a distributor or a wholesaler and just selling them in their retail stores. So,
Sure.
um,
So they came after
but
that. And so the state
mhm,
so the state of the hemp industry before this most recent CR was, you'd seen some increase of regulations on things outside of Delta 9, some testing, some labeling, and hemp beverages were put under the same rules as alcoholic beverages, the 3-tier system.
mhm.
And then this bill passes at the federal level with the CR. What exactly does it do?
So the federal CR language changed the way that we measure whether or not it's hemp or marijuana, and it changed it to effectively ban all hemp products that have any trace levels of THC. So even things like CBD, full spectrum CBD gummies or drops. And it did that by changing it from, anything less than 0.3% Delta 9 THC to anything that is greater than 0.4 milligrams of THC at all. So, and for those that aren't really great at math is not my strong subject. If you're going to say, like, I have a product here, and in this product I have maybe it's a gummy. So if there's less than 0.4 milligrams of THC in that gummy, that's very, very low. Now, if I wanted to have 0.3% THC in this gummy by dry weight, there's going to be quite a bit more because it's a percentage of the total weight of the gummy. So they can put more THC. That right there is a good example of what federal, congressmen were calling the loophole. Is that, well, it's a percentage of the weight of the total product. So if I have a candy bar that weighs a lot more than a gummy, I can get a lot more THC in there. And so this ban changed that percentage to a dry weight. No more than 0.4 milligrams of THC in the entire product. And that's at any stage in the process. So remember we talked about having Everclear and extracting the extract out of it like the old fashioned way. Nobody's really doing that. They're using, equipment to extract. But when you extract that, you take all the plant material out of the weight of what you have in your hand. And you're just, looking at the weight of the extract. That's going to be above 0.4 milligrams of THC. It might have been below 0.3%, but it's definitely going to be above 0.4 milligrams. So that takes out of the industry all the full spectrum products, whether it's CBD, CBN, Delta 8, if there's any products that have Delta 9 in there, all of those products are.
Does it affect the fiber products as well? Your ability to grow?
No, it would not affect the fiber products. In fact, that's something that we do at my shop. We do animal bedding. We make fire starters with the stalk materials. We also use the roots. I'm sure I told you before about our wonderful root salve. That is, a lot of people use it for pain and inflammation. And the roots of the plant do not have any cannabinoids at all. So the roots, the seeds, and the fiber, the stalk of the plant, none of those parts of the plant contain high levels of cannabinoids or really any cannabinoids. So unless you just got a little cannabinoid on it.
Hemp rope, for an example, what part of the plant are you using? Are you using the stalk or are you using the...
That's the stalk. So in the stalk you have, if you imagine, it's sort of like bamboo. It's got a hollow core. The outside skin, if you peel that outside skin off, what we would consider the bark, like the bark of a tree, that's where your fiber is going to be. It's like a little thin ring around the stalk of the plant. All your fiber is in there. And then the hard woody core of the plant, that's where you're going to get things like animal bedding, even cellulose. So it's essentially it's
so
wood.
If it's regulating it by weight, though, if that plant then though exceeds the levels, the plant's illegal, even if it's meant for fiber, correct?
I mean, by my reckoning, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't profess to be one, but I do enjoy law and I do enjoy legislation and language. By what I can tell, if that plant has greater than 0.4 milligrams in the entire plant, I think it's illegal.
How hard is it to get a plant with less than 0.4 milligrams in the entire plant?
I mean, you could genetically modify it.
So it doesn't
genetically modify and do whatever you want. Now, if you're doing natural selection, like a lot of breeders are not they're not genetically manipulating the plant, but they're breeding for certain things. And so you, the plants that are very low in THC, like the seed plants, the fiber plants, they're going to be extremely low in THC. It's going to be hard at times to even get, the trace amounts of THC that are in there. But I think if you wanted to be really specific about, whether or not that, I think you're probably going to have more than 0.4 milligrams in the whole plant.
So it is
And maybe
possible.
close. It is possible.
It is possible that currently, you don't know this for a fact, but currently there may not be a hemp plant that exists that would fulfill the requirement of this law, even if you're using it for fiber.
It is definitely possible. I have heard, and this has probably been 10 plus years, that some, organizations, whether or not I really, buy into these organizations, will say, but there were organizations that were working on genetically manipulated zero THC hemp plants. So
So it has to be genetically modified. So there's no natural hemp plant that would be legal anymore. It would have to be this genetically modified plant, even if you're just using it for fiber, paper, whatever. It would have to be.
I do think so. I think we can make a really good argument from the seed and fiber side that, like, this is not what you guys were trying to ban. But I think we would have to do some testing, because as of now, I don't think anybody, they're testing these fiber crops for less than 0.3% THC. I don't know that anybody's been testing them for, like, how many milligrams, how much weight is there. So I'm not sure that kind of testing has even been done. I think we needed to grow out some crops and find out how much THC is in the plant. And quite frankly, if that helps make our argument, like, I thought you didn't want to ban fiber, I thought you weren't trying to ban rope, and now here you did. But it's certainly going to prevent any CBD plants. So the ones that really, blew up, not blew up in a bad way, like proliferated. Kentucky's hemp industry was the CBD full spectrum stuff, and that is definitely not gonna be less than 0.4 milligrams of THC. I mean, they're heavy in cannabinoids, even though they're bred to have low THC. There's still enough there, and it's so heavy in cannabinoid production that CBD plants are not going to be safe.
So how much? So if we're looking at Kentucky's hemp crop, I'm sure you probably have the numbers of the economic impact of it. So what is the current yearly economic impact of our hemp industry in Kentucky?
Gosh, I wish I knew the Kentucky only. I know nationwide they're saying right now 28 billion is kind of the talking point.
Would you say Kentucky's is a billion, more than a billion?
I think I think the last I recall, it was at least like 300 million. But that is something that, our association has been talking about. Like, we need a real solid economic study, an economic impact study that's not done by a cannabis group, that's not like a pro cannabis economic.
Yeah, like something where it's like
just realistically,
because based upon what you're saying, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, but when this continuing resolution, when does it take effect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's 1 year from the date that they passed it, which was 2-3 weeks ago.
Okay, so within the next year, correct me if I'm wrong, every single hemp crop in Kentucky would be illegal,
with the exception of roughly 2.5% of the crops. If we are gonna assume that those fiber and seed crops are safe. Now, if they turn out to not be safe, then all of it is gone. But right now, 97.5% of Kentucky's acreage is grown for cannabinoids.
So 97.5% of our hemp crop will be illegal, possibly 100% of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was added on by McConnell.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I mean, he's on his way out. This is an industry in Kentucky. Why was it so important for him? I mean, literally the country shut down and it was so important for him. He's got to add this on now. Why do you think they did it? Why was it that important?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was important because, we had that competition piece. We're competing with big pharma, we're competing with big tobacco, we're competing with big alcohol. And so that competition piece, I think, is why we keep having a ban every other year or every year in some cases. But this was not the first time that McConnell tried this. We actually beat this bill. I think it was Representative Andy Harris that tried to file it back in the summer. We beat it fair and square, and it was quiet. It didn't need a big media push or anything. We just, did the right things, talked to the right people, worked with Congress, and killed it. And then a second time, it was sort of fired up and never actually made it to any committees. Before we jumped on it right away, and kind of feel like they got scared a little bit and dropped it the second time. And this was the third time, to my knowledge, that this had been attempted in DC. But what was different about this one is, in like the first couple of times they tried to get it through, they just said, okay, we're going to vote on this hemp ban. And then other Congress people were like, wow, that's silly. I don't want to do that. And so they're like, okay, well, we can't pass this bill on its own merits. How do we get it passed? Well, you stick it into the bill to reopen the government because it's got to pass. Like at some point, that bill to reopen the government is it's gonna pass. They'll sit and they'll argue back and forth, and they do their little political theater where they make it like it's about healthcare or something like that. And we all know that they're anxious to get back to normal spending levels like they always are. So they just slipped it into a bill that had to pass, called it a clean CR, which was laughable considering what was in it, and probably, I'm going to say most Congress people probably didn't even know that there was a hemp ban in there.
Yeah, it's it's a little fascinating. That's the head scratcher to me. I just can't, for the life of me, it's an important industry to your state.
Mm-hmm.
It is debatable. We know it'll kill 97.5% of the current crop. They're going to have to, if they continue growing, grow something else. Could be 100%. It could be that there's one seed game on the market now that you can buy seed from. Lord knows they're going to be jacking up the prices. Yeah. I would. I'd be like, suddenly I'm the only legal hemp seed in the country.
Yeah.
What did I say? 500% increase. And so but it's so important to your state, and you're on your way out. You don't need more money. It's not like, you need to be bringing in funds. You're not running for office again. And frankly, you'll probably not be on this earth anymore within the next 5 to 6 years, I would imagine. I mean, just, I'm not trying to be dark, but
I mean,
he's like 90 years old. He's like 87, So how old is McConnell?
I don't know, but it's up there. It's
83. He's 83. So he's 83 now. So yeah, I mean, within 5 years after leaving office, you probably won't be on this earth anymore. You'll be 90 years old. That's a good run. Good run. You may hold on longer, but you're currently having health issues too as well. Obviously, you're freezing up, everything else. So you probably won't be here anymore. You're not going to be relevant in politics. You've done already tarnish your legacy to the point where you're not going to really be somebody anybody cares about. Nobody's going to be like, oh man, I got McConnell's endorsement. I've got it handled,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Especially considering a lot of people in Kentucky don't like them.
Yeah. Why destroy an industry within your state? That's what I don't get, unless it was like, hey, do this for the caucus. They'll give us a bunch of money. you don't care anyways about what people think about you. Kill a key industry within your state.
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, and I've heard all kinds of things over the last couple of weeks. Well, the alcohol lobby gave him $900,000, but I'm like, well, why does that matter if he's not running for office again?
And he's
the
worth
pharmaceutical
millions.
companies. It's but there are very entrenched, very big, wealthy corporations that own pieces of every industry, and when we know this, it's not a big conspiracy that BlackRock owns a piece of every major corporation. But you got to wonder how much of a threat is hemp, where as soon as these beverages took off, and we don't even know really the economic impact of these beverages right now. There are some people that are saying that the hemp beverage industry, if we had like a rock solid study done, it would look more like 200 billion. And maybe that's what it is. That's just the beverages. My goodness, cannabis is a gateway to health and more family time and happier individuals and less DUIs, and getting into a lot of people, cannabis, whether it's hemp, smoking weed, whatever form it takes, oftentimes is a gateway to natural living. Next thing you know, they're getting chickens and they're homesteading and they're making sourdough bread, and it's not just cannabis that's comfrey, and
the
it's
hippies of the
mullein
60s are
and
some of the most conservative people I know now.
absolutely,
Like the
absolutely.
hippie culture people that live in a way you would describe as hippies, they're some of the most conservative, God-fearing people.
Absolutely, absolutely, because they're close to nature, and because they're close to nature, they're close to God. I mean,
well, also I think they've been pretty consistent of I don't want government to tell me what to do. And in the 60s and 70s, they viewed the Republican Party as the ones telling them what to do, and now it's, well, the Democrats are telling us what to do too.
Yeah.
So
Just
it's
nobody
kind
tell
of,
us what to do.
yeah, we just don't want anybody
right.
to tell. We don't care what you have next to your name. Well, that's a sad point. Hopefully something can happen, but most likely not. What do you think? So bill passes, nothing happens. Is the hemp industry, is it dead in Kentucky? Do you have to leave it? How many small businesses are closed?
Well, I don't know a number on the small businesses. Again, that's another reason why we really need to get a solid study. But I think, I plan on fighting. A lot of people are fired up. There's more people fired up of customers, moms. I mean, I've got grandmas like out here writing op-eds. I haven't seen people this fired up about hemp since 2013, when we passed the bill in Kentucky to legalize it. So I think I would say my advice to the industry, and what I'll be pushing in the industry, is let's continue to work with our state regulators, and let's continue to try to improve the areas that we wanted to improve, lower licensing fees, make the regulators more effective, things like that. Let's keep working with the regulators. Let's prove that we're good actors. Don't just quit, close your doors, and be done with it. Let's spend the next year selling your products, proving that we're good actors, doing the things right, paying your taxes, paying your licensing fees, and just kind of demonstrating that we're a good member of the economy, that we're doing this for the right reasons, and so on. So I think that's what we need to do. On the government relations side, as far as legislation, there's a bunch of bills out floating around right now. There's a bill to repeal the ban, bills and talks on letting the states decide how to regulate it, and making it kind of a 10th Amendment issue. And right now there's a bit of a scramble for the industry to network, collaborate better, and then all kind of get on the same page and find a bill that we like, even a couple of bills maybe, and then try to get those passed.
If the product is, if Kentucky does something like says, we're going to have this different regulation, and it's grown within the state lines and it's only sold within state lines, would that then mean that the federal regulation of it is now null and void because it's based upon Commerce Clause?
Yeah, actually,
Kind of like legalizing marijuana, they do in other states, where it's like, well, this is interstate, we're not crossing state lines, so it's now.
Yeah.
But now you have to worry about banking issues.
Yeah,
For your
absolutely. So, well, you're absolutely right, and you're exactly right as far as, well, these marijuana states, or legal states, they're not shipping their products, they're not sending their products out of state, unless it's to Kentucky, because that's where people leave all the time and bring back weed. But but anyway, they're not supposed to. And in our Kentucky hemp industry, the way that it's set up now, we do have interstate commerce. That's part of our federal, what we can do.
Right, because you're
federally,
following
legally.
the federal guidelines.
Yes. So in our conversations about, how do we fix this? How do we reform this? We have to figure out, how are we going to do this and still allow people to be able to sell out of state? Because the vast majority of our industry is producing in Kentucky and shipping it immediately out of state. And they might be processed in another state because another state might have a regulatory structure that's easier on their hemp processors or things like that. But then they might be shipping those products right back into the state once they're finished.
Well, it seems like it would be a great opportunity for the state within itself to say, to take a step, because you kind of have a built-in, okay, if it's grown in Kentucky and then the products are made in Kentucky, as long as the product leaving meets the federal guidelines, right? And so maybe, your chocolate's a lot smaller or your gummies are a lot smaller. You know what I mean? We can play this game all day. If you want to play it, I can get tiny molds, grab a handful of gummies and throw it in. We can get nerd gummies. We can play this game. But and then also when it comes to the fact that even the fiber products are under threat here, for the General Assembly to come in and say, look, we're going to have different regulations than the federal government. That way, we're not only going to keep the crops growing, but also we're going to push the manufacturing that maybe was taking place in other states. It's going to necessarily have to come here so you can ship out of state. And it could be a great, and especially too, as you look at some of these places like Western, Eastern Kentucky rural areas, what's cheaper, shipping truckloads of plant or shipping a truckload of finished product?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be a lot easier and a lot more cost effective to just send those finished products than.
Right. And so it could be moving manufacturing of these products into those areas. But this is something where I know the legislature, they don't like to create jobs in a way that doesn't involve handing out hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. But simple regulation differences could really lead to quite an economic boom in some of these areas. So
yeah, and while our focus has been on the feds, especially during this last month, we also really have to look at what does this mean for Kentucky and the legislature? Are they going to say, okay, well, we won, you don't get to have anything, or is there anybody in the legislature? And I know there are a good solid contingent of hemp supporters, but are there folks in the legislature that would support us? Maybe support us to function like how they function in legal marijuana states, because marijuana has been federally illegal all this whole time. They never made it legal. Like, these states are just functioning on fully fledged state programs, allowing them to grow these cannabis plants, and maybe that's the answer for Kentucky too, but doesn't solve the interstate banking or interstate commerce, doesn't solve banking. So still have a lot of work to do.
Doesn't. Well, Katie, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I thank you all so much for joining. If you missed part of the interview because you were watching on radio or TV and you went ahead and, we had to cut off early just because of the time constraints there, you can head over to theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's theandrewshow.com. See all the different places you can listen to the show. You can also catch on social media to catch the end of this interesting conversation as we dig through the ramifications of for Kentucky here. But otherwise, till next time, we'll be seeing you.